one of my concepts of peace as I grew up was a sense that peace meant that there was no type of conflict or danger or imbalance. When we look at nature and we think of peace, a peaceful forest is a beautiful sight to see, but in that forest there are predators, there are prey, there are natural disruptions that cause the plant life and the animal life to adjust. And that's all part of the biological cycle. It's the environmental cycle. So as I grew older, I began to understand that peace is not an absence of disagreement. It's not an absence of strongly held beliefs that run into conflict with one another. There are ideals that are expressed in our Declaration of Independence and in our Constitution that help support that idea, that you can have strong disagreements, but you don't get rid of people whose views you don't agree with. Those are stated ideals, but it's something we've never been able to live up to. And we've never been able to make forward progress in that area without having pushback and a regression in the way we treat each other. Quaker meetings have an independence that is pretty much what I'm talking about. We do not deny that people who have meetings that are similar to mainline Christian churches, we don't deny that they're Quakers. It's not our choice, but we're not saying that they have to be who we are. And we're not going to put them down because they're that and we are different. You have examples of bringing people together that used to exist when we had a draft in this country. People came from all over. They were trained and adhered to this group cohesiveness that you need to have if you're going to have a unit that operates the way an army should. If you look at Europe with the generation of youngsters who are benefiting from the European Union, who think of themselves as Europeans and nationals. And that's in a space, even with England, with France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Greece, even that's not as big as the United States. But those individual units fought for 12 to 1500 years after the collapse of the Roman Empire, because their little piece was supposed to be the main thing that was going on. So it would not be hard in America, and especially in New York, for people who are going to school together, mainly in public schools, to develop an appreciation for the various cultures of the people who are in that school at that time. The only things that I see that push against that would be institutions in their child's life that tell them that they are separate and better, or that other people are inferior to them. So if we could let nature take its course, these institutions like public schools and churches that would function the way we function as Quakers would unify us. People who have very similar experiences then turn around and demonize other people because they have the same experience. For example, if someone moves from the rural South or from Appalachia or from a place where there's a lot of poverty, limited opportunities and so forth, and they secure a place to live in New York, and then their family joins them to live in an overcrowded situation in an apartment or a house. Sometimes the people who went through that experience themselves, their children will look down on those people, even though their family had the same experience. And it's amazing how common that is. So if you get people from the rural South who move in and go through that experience, then they might look down on people coming from Puerto Rico in my age cohort. And then you get Puerto Ricans who go through that, and then maybe they look down on Eastern Europeans who are coming and going through the same experience. How you break that cycle without the support of the culture is something that amazes me. Films can go a long way in trying to curb that view that people have, because no one has come to America and not gone through that experience, I don't think. Eliminating or discounting people's culture, which is something that happened for most of my life. There was a dominant American story that basically focused on Northern European people coming to settle in the United States, what became the United States. And that was considered to be the best of cultures. But as people who came from Africa began to be proud of their ancestors, as people from the South American and Latin American nations came and did the same thing, as Slavic people came out of Europe and did the same thing, there was a tension that was denigrating, discounting, or putting down the dominant Northern European culture that had been established here. There's no way of getting rid of Chinese food. I mean, no matter what culture you come from, you're going to experience Chinese food in America. There's no way of getting rid of the rhythmic contribution to music that comes out of Africa, blues and gospel. There's no way to get rid of philosophies that came out of Europe, out of Egypt, Africa, Eastern Europe, and Asia. So rather than being proud of this, there's a segment of people with influence who see these things as seditious. And how you maintain that it's not seditious, but a wonderful contribution to American culture is the problem that I push back against. If you looked at the 1920s and 30s, when jazz music was very popular, it was entering into American mainstream, there are people who thought that jazz was the devil music, and the saxophone especially was the devil instrument, but they couldn't stop it. I mean, it was a music that reached people in ways that government could not. And no matter how they tried to suppress it, they could not. And the same thing happened when you had rock and roll, when you had reggae, when you had world music. These things speak to the hearts of people, and it's out of control of the government. And the only thing you could try to do is shut it down. My partner Inga, her father said that when he was inducted into the German army, they played American jazz, which was considered to be Jewish and black music. And they wanted to introduce how inferior it was. But when the music started, the kids were moving around in the seats so much that they never tried it again, because the music speaks. And one of the things I've been fascinated with is the evolution of the image of the African American in film. We go from, in my lifetime, we go from Step and Fetch It to playing God, President of the United States, like Morgan Freeman would do, or captains of industry and whatnot. That's a huge step. That could not have taken place unless there was the energy and the will and the conviction in this country to, first of all, make money. The films that came out, starting with things like Shaft, the black superhero, and the music that went with it, was so stunning that it opened the door for a lot of those so-called blaxploitation films to take place. And then you get into very more and more serious dramas that star African Americans, and they make money too, and that incentivizes the film industry. But the message of the films, that also comes with the profits. And what it says is that people are equal. You know, there can be a John Wayne, and there can be a Morgan Freeman or Samuel L. Jackson. One of the major turning points for American TV was the original series of Roots, which was very violent. But it was also a film that represented the conviction of black people to move forward in the sense that they were pushing towards having a life that was as full and as close to equality as it could be in their time. That never really dissipated. That all through the Jim Crow years, that push continued. And because it continued, you get the civil rights legislation that took place. You get the pushback also, but that's because it can never be center stage for very long in America at this point. I don't know if it ever will be. What they forget with this is, and I'm not sure it's people forgetting, but what gets lost is that there is never a time when those who prefer to have their privilege and they think that's the correct order of the universe, they're not going to rest. They're going to come back and try to erase what's happened. And that part of facing the backlash is never going to be, or has never been in my lifetime, front and center for the American people. It's always been a concern for people of African descent, but not for the majority of the country. And I understand that, but to then say that if you keep pushing, you're radical, you keep referring to something that's past, that I can't accept. That's people who don't understand how the world works. The battle or the push to open up the minds of people is one serious problem for us. If you had just come to America from Poland and you were told that people of African descent in this country are lazy, want to live off the state and not work, uneducated, and you looked around and you saw that black people were living in projects where there was violence, where people rarely went from high school into college, and you didn't know about Jim Crow, and you didn't know about the black towns like the Greenwood district of Kentucky, or Rosewood in Florida, or hundreds of others that were like that, how they were burned down by people who resented the progress of African American people. And you didn't know that this had been achieved, that people had been educated, they had responsible jobs, that the communities were growing. What would you have to discount that narrative? You don't have it, because our educational system does not make sure that people have this knowledge. And they have excuses. We don't want to make white kids feel bad about themselves. They don't have to feel bad about themselves because of those people like Thaddeus Stevens and others who are trying to push to make things equal. They have this blind spot that they disseminate to newcomers, and then that they promulgate around the world. That these are just lazy people, they can't get anything done. That's a real problem. And it's a problem for everybody, but especially for those of us who have kids and grandkids. How do we convey to them that these things happen, and this is the condition that we have? You know, we got to do it ourselves. We can't depend on the school, we can't depend on the church, we can't depend on politicians, none of that.